Folks, we are live. Welcome to Talking Crit. I am one of your hosts, Eric Tenkar, your bartender in the OSR. Below me today, for no particular reason. I'm not going to go into that.
I'm a bottom today.
You're the bottom. My work spouse, my once a week work spouse, Bad Mike Battalato, and with us, stage right. I always have to make sure I get this right. Is none other than Joe Bloch, the Greyhawk Grognard. Joe, welcome.
Thank you much. And I have actually my co-host.
Woohoo!
to go with today's theme of what I'm
we need
talking.
that. We'll have to talk about that when we're talking about some stuff. Is the infantilism of Cthulhu now? Because I think the first time I saw Cthulhu plushie, I thought, man, maybe we're going the wrong direction with this. I don't know, but that is such a huge thing right now. But we can talk about that later too.
What, Cthulhu for president? Come on.
Well, I mean, that was the first. So Cthulhu for president, I think 84 was the first kind of wink humor, because up until then, the Cthulhu Mythos was just die hard. Oh man, it's just serious shit. I mean, there's no humor involved here. This is bad news. And then Chaosium started leaning into it a little bit, and here we are, 2022. We have Cthulhu plushies and cute little Yog-Sothoth, and
I actually got this for my kid 18 or 19 years ago, and I'm just amazed that it's still in such great shape. I wanted to introduce them young.
And as well you should. If you're going to corrupt them while they're very corruptible. Come on.
So we have Joe on this week, and Joe has been a fixture in the OSR community for quite a while. We have the Mad Archmages.
Castle Mad Archmage.
Kotmar.
I'm sorry, I had an issue with I got cut off there. Sorry, guys.
That's okay.
Yes, Castle the Mad Archmage. And you've had quite a few. You've Adventures Dark and Dangerous.
Adventures Dark and Deep.
Dark and what?
Deep.
God dang it!
Right acronym though.
This is our.
I wonder how that happened.
This is no show. This is what no show prep does. Eventually, eventually, I f it up. But anyway, so which was a great idea. It was the rule set that Gary should have put out but never put out. So that was kind of a cool little sidebar there. And now we have you're running a Kickstarter for something called Swords of Cthulhu, which sounds pretty interesting. And I'm actually surprised we haven't seen more of this as Lovecraft and Cthulhu becomes more public domain. This is a Lovecraftian Cthulhu-ish supplement for D&D, correct?
Correct. It's kind of a follow-up to my last book, which was the Book of Lost Lore. And it's, like you said, it's focused on Lovecraft and the Cthulhu Mythos. It's got new races, new classes, new spells, monsters, obviously, mythos, grimoires. It's got a whole lot of sections on how to run a D&D Lovecraft swords and sorcery kind of thing, because it's a very you can't really look at the Lovecraft mythos as it's just another bunch of monsters. There's a whole different attitude that you need to take with it if you really want to treat the material right. But yeah, it's basically like what if there was an unearthed arcana of Cthulhu. Basically just a whole bunch of stuff to add to your existing old school game.
Well, you actually have a question already, but it's not about Swords of Cthulhu. Are hardcovers of the Book of Lost Lore still available?
Absolutely. Go on to Drive-Thru RPG. You will find them both. And it's funny you should ask, because right now, the hardcovers of Book of Lost Lore and Book of Lost Beasts are on sale for 10% off. The hardcovers.
Oh, that's part of the hardcovers.
They hardly ever do that. All their sales are always for PDFs. But for right now, for the next week or so, the hard copies are actually on sale for 10% off. They're on Drive-Thru.
Very nice. All right. See now, and I'm sure somebody can ask, how can you use Cthulhu in your title? I thought that was like a Chaosium deal. Only they had the rights.
Well, yeah, Chaosium does cast a long shadow. There's no doubt about that. What I had to do with this book was because of the copyright issues, because almost all of Lovecraft's original stories are in the public domain now.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So, but all the other stuff, like the August Derleth stuff, the Clark Ashton Smith stuff, the Robert Bloch stuff, the Robert E. Howard stuff, all that stuff is still copyrighted. It's just the Lovecraft stuff itself that is in the public domain, and that's mostly 99% of it.
Right.
So I had to limit myself to only those things that were that Lovecraft published himself, and also several stories that he wrote with other people. Several collaborations are also in the public domain. And this posed a really interesting challenge because a lot of the stuff that we just take for granted, if you're a fan of the Lovecraft, the Cthulhu Mythos, there's a lot of things you just take for granted.
Right.
And so much of that stuff came from those other authors because they all shared, Lovecraft didn't care that other people would use his creations. He encouraged it. They all did that back in the day. It was called the Lovecraft Circle. And, but all that other stuff is now copyrighted still. And Chaosium has bought the rights to a lot of that material. So they have the rights to the Clark Ashton Smith stuff, or I don't know their specific right holding things, but they have the rights to a bunch of that stuff, whereas I obviously don't. I'm just working off of the public domain. So I had to go back to the original sources. Whenever I read basically the entire corpus of Lovecraft's works, and that is not a short read. And even this book doesn't have the collaborations.
Really?
You can find online, but they're it's tough to find them all together. So I went back to the original sources, and there is so much there that sometimes gets overlooked because you've got all these other authors that added so much more. And if you just keep yourself to the narrow definition of this is what Lovecraft himself wrote, and a few other people that wrote before him that are also in the public domain, then you get a very different emphasis on things. You see this with figures like Nyarlathotep or Hastur is a perfect example. The original Lovecraftian stuff was in Hastur's case barely a mention of a name. And a couple of things here and there, but no real definition of Hastur. And Nyarlathotep was mentioned by name very, very often, but only actually appeared as a character in a couple of the stories. And even those were wildly different. So what started off as being a limitation, that I couldn't use Clark Ashton Smith, I couldn't use August Derleth, Robert Bloch,
right.
Lumley and all that stuff, Brian Lumley, it turned into an exercise in creativity because I could take those few little mentions that Lovecraft had in his work and just run with it.
Oh, okay.
Because I was not only not constrained by what others had wrote, I was actually prevented from using what they wrote. So I take the original stuff from Lovecraft and go in a completely different direction on purpose, just to differentiate what I did from that. Plus, I had to do some inventing of my own. There's a few things in there, a few books that I invented, just because I wanted to add a little, my own little stuff.
Right.
What I was going to ask him, so if you start looking at the authors that wrote Cthulhu Mythos stuff, Howard and Derleth and all that, they always would add like a monster or a creature. But and there's a lot of those, Lumley, all that stuff. When you get rid of those, what are you left with the core Lovecraftian Cthulhu Mythos monster? I mean, you got deep ones, right?
Yeah.
What else do you have? What else was one of them? Because now I'm even confused. As much as I've read Lovecraft stuff, it's hard for me to remember what was Lovecraft, what was somebody else. Right,
and sometimes Lovecraft would mention something, and then another author would take it and just run with it themselves. There's a lot of stuff in the Dreamlands cycle that that's really his own kind of very fantasy, in the way that we normally think of fantasy kind of writing. So there's a lot of monsters there. That's where you have what are they called? Gugs and night gaunts and stuff like that. You see a lot of those kinds of things. Zoogs. are in the Dreamlands. And I have a lot of Dreamland stuff in my book too, but I'm limited to just those stories that Lovecraft wrote about the Dreamlands. So there's a whole cycle of those things, but it's very limited compared to what you see in a lot of other things. Like the Chaosium did a terrific source book on the Dreamlands, but they, by definition, had to invent a whole bunch of stuff themselves. Now, another thing about my stuff is it's not based in 1920s New England. It's intended to be a Dungeons and Dragons supplement, right? And D&D, especially first edition D&D, has its own conventions. It has its own language. It has its own expectations. So when I'm doing all this stuff, I have to work within those limitations and those expectations. So my stuff on the Dreamlands has little to do with the way the Dreamlands were in the stories, because he was describing, this is the Dreamlands of Earth in the 20th century. Every world has its own Dreamlands. And so in my book, I give an explanation of that, and that is an excuse and an opportunity for the DM, or the GM, as we must say, to create their own Dreamlands for their world, and to kind of make it the antithesis in terms of tone of the campaign that you're already running. So if you're running a very low magic, gritty, realistic campaign, your Dreamlands, you turn that on its head, and your Dreamlands are going to be this high magic or maybe even steampunky kind of thing with all kinds of crazy stuff going on. And that way, when the characters visit the Dreamlands, they're still still the same campaign, but they're now able to see a completely different side of it.
That's pretty. I mean, all right, not what I would have expected. But let me put it that way. That's a nice little twist to something. Now, I am a fan of Call of Cthulhu. I've read some H.P. Lovecraft fiction, not all of it, certainly. I've watched some pretty poorly made H.P. Lovecraft inspired movies. They've all invariably sucked shit. I'm sorry.
We got to talk about that in a minute. Then keep going. Right. But I want to talk about the movies.
But I've always liked bringing things like evil that is just incomprehensible into a fantasy setting, because it adds something like it plays like, well, evil is evil, right? Goblins are evil, orcs are evil, evil dragons, whatever. But when you're dealing with the old ones, it is evil that is uncaring evil. It's I don't even know if we can even call it necessarily evil. It is what man would do to ants.
Right.
So
exactly.
Different level.
And from the standpoint of a Cthulhu or a Hastur or a Shub-Niggurath, even a figure like Asmodeus is nothing. It's completely inconsequential. It doesn't matter if you're a first level paladin or if you're Demogorgon. You're literally you might as well not exist as far as these other creatures are aware of you. And that is the thing that you can use to differentiate a Lovecraftian entity from something like an ordinary demon lord or an ordinary archdevil, is that absolute indifference. It's almost an amorality. Because remember, in D&D, you have a very well-defined evil means you believe X. And you can relate to that. We as human beings, we as people, outside of the game, we can relate to Asmodeus's motives, right? We when Orcus wants to do something, we can appreciate that and we can kind of understand it from our own perspectives. You literally cannot comprehend Cthulhu's motives. It's literally beyond your ability to understand why he does what he does and when he does it. And that's the kind of thing that you have to push in there. Cthulhu doesn't care if you sack his temple.
Right.
Orcus, you're gonna have a vendetta, and it's gonna be a whole lot. But Cthulhu or Shub-Niggurath or Yog-Sothoth, they don't even realize you've done it, because it's so far below their level of attention it's a completely different way of playing it, and it is a subtle thing because it is too easy to fall into the trap of, oh, this is just another monster manual. And I think that's where, for all that I love Deities and Demigods, the original,
right?
I think that's where that fell into a problem, especially in terms of the Cthulhu Mythos. Because, when I got that when I was 12 or 13 years old, aside from looking from gazing at the picture of Isis, once I got past that, is that it just kind of treated Cthulhu and Hastur and all the rest as just another bunch of entities like any other. And I think, you could say that that's a bad thing in terms of any pantheon of deities, but especially in terms of the myth.
Well, I mean, that was the whole thing with deities and demigods, right? It's like, oh, these aren't like my 20th level characters. Now this is new things that I can actually attack and grab new, more exciting magic items that are Thor's hammer or whatever else I'm going to be taking.
Right.
It wasn't it wasn't like, oh, this is actually a book of deities where we're describing the actual religious practices, what benefits the clerics get, which at least later on with Greyhawk and Forgotten Realms, they took some of that into account to make whatever deity your characters, especially the clerics, were following, make a difference. Back with the original book, it really was, hit points in armor class, and okay.
Yeah, Zeus has 400 hit points. Okay, and an armor class. I can kill him.
So.
Exactly. And that really doesn't serve well for this. Now, I do give stats for the Cthulhu Mythos entities because, again, it's AD&D, or I should say it's first edition compatible, and there's a certain expectation of that sort of thing. But I try to emphasize that this isn't just another bunch of things to kill.
Well, I just one of the options in the new Cthulhu book is that you have new player characters, and one is the Deep One hybrid.
Yes,
which would actually be pretty cool because I'm sure there's no spoilers here. If you don't know Shadow over Innsmouth by now, too bad. But at the end, the narrator finds out he's actually a hybrid Deep One, and so that I wonder if that's something a DM could talk about with the player, or just spring that on a player halfway through the campaign. Like, oh, by the way, you have this affinity for the ocean and stuff. Yeah, you're kind of like a hybrid. You just didn't really know it earlier.
I wish I thought of that. I wish I thought of being able to do that, but I did not put that in the book. But yes, there are Deep One hybrids and also degenerates, and that was a big theme of Lovecraft's work.
That's most players. I mean,
well, there is that.
Not the characters, just the players.
Hey, I've been at cons. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, and you add new insanity rules. Now, I think that we've all experienced the insanity rules in Call of Cthulhu. Even if you've never played in a campaign, I think you've probably played a one shot. You've played in a convention game. The idea of an actual Call of Cthulhu campaign is probably a misnomer to most people, because just staying sane is usually enough if you can finish a session. But how do insanity rules work in an OSR game, where you are expecting to make this probably a campaign game?
Right.
How is that going to work? I'd be interested.
Because, well, in Call of Cthulhu, famously, they have sanity points, right? And you get enough sanity points, or you lose enough sanity points. I forget if it's ascending or descending.
Right.
But eventually you go bonkers and you lose control and you're out. In Swords of Cthulhu, I actually built on the existing mechanics that are in first edition. That is the saving throw mechanic.
Okay.
So you'll have a saving throw versus breath weapon, a saving throw versus wands, and a saving throw versus poison. Now you have a saving throw against insanity. And if you fail the saving throw, you will get either a temporary or a permanent form of insanity. And there's a long, huge, vast table of all the different kinds of insanities that you can get. And of course, there are sub-tables because it's old school, so there's tables everywhere.
Right.
Some of them will last for a specific amount of time, and they have specific effects. Some of them are permanent, but a lot of them also require a trigger. So, when you have a form of insanity, let's say you have a form of mania, where you get hyper-focused on something, it's not going to be happening to you all the time, right? There are certain triggers, and you roll for the trigger. If you do get a type of insanity that has a trigger, you roll for the trigger that's going to do it. And it could be, seeing a mythos creature. It could be, being around somebody of the opposite sex. It could be all kinds of different things that are in there. But you're not insane all the time.
Okay.
Well, I should say, it doesn't manifest itself all the time. It manifests itself in specific circumstances, which I think is, on the one hand, is much easier to play. Because you can have a whole bunch of insanities, lurking in the back of your mind. They come, they go. You lose one, you get another. You got a couple of permanent ones, but they don't manifest themselves unless certain specific things happen. And I think that makes it much more manageable on a long term. Plus, there are spells. Right. There are actually spells dealing with insanity. There's a cure insanity spell.
All right, that makes sense.
Because in a first edition world, you would expect, if something is that prevalent, that there would be spells to mitigate it. Just like poison in an old school game too. There's slow poison, there's cure poison. In the same way, there's an analogy to insanity in this book.
I like that, and I'm looking forward to this. I mean, as John Miller said in the comments, and he's back apparently. Every project of yours.
Woohoo!
There you go.
Thank you, John.
We found the one guy that did. There he is.
Yeah. I mean, I've been following your stuff since Adventures Dark and Deep because that, to me, is pretty much what I would have liked to have seen 2E become. I didn't know any better, honestly. When I was playing 2E, I was like, oh, well, these books are bigger and they've got blue color to them. They must be better. And the reality is that I think our gameplay was a lot more streamlined and fun with 1E than it was with 2E. But it's newer, so it must be better, especially when you're how old we were when that came out, like 18, 19.
2E was more homogenized, I think.
Yeah.
But mechanically, it was very similar. You could use first edition stuff with second edition stuff for the most part, and vice versa. You could have kits in first edition, and it wouldn't break it. Which is one of the brilliant things about first edition is its modularity. You could swap out the combat system completely with like arms law and claw law, like a lot of us did back in the day.
Oh yeah,
and it didn't break it.
No.
And to that point, this book, although it's kind of written with a 1E focus, as you could tell from the cover, if you're playing 2E or a 2E type game, this will work fine. I mean, it's that compatible.
And that's all your stuff has pretty much been that type of compatible.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's generically 1E,
Yeah, I mean, and isn't that like honestly, like with playing 1E, I was always grabbing stuff from basic and mix smashing, and that one point of difference in AC made no point of difference in actual gameplay.
Right.
So it was all hand waved,
and especially back in the day, it's not even that we didn't care about this is basic, that's advanced. A lot of us didn't really even make that distinction.
No, we made it. Basic was for babies, and advanced was for the very smart and intelligent teenagers that we were when we were playing advanced D&D. Because we were playing basic, that would have been our younger siblings, and that.
Okay. Because for me, it was just I'll take what if I happen to have In Search of the Unknown, I'm going to run a first edition. Even though it doesn't say advanced on the cover.
John Miller wants to know, has anyone here played Joe's Castle of the Mad Archmage? I actually ran a campaign once a month for about a year and a half. with it. It is an immensely fun campaign. It is, in my opinion, what Castle Greyhawk should have been, with lacking the gummy bears, but and being a real threat, but still being quirky. 'Cause I like quirky. I can really enjoy stuff like that. So
I still want to do the map without the slopes and stuff on it.
Well, I'm going to give you an idea, Joe. You can steal this idea. And so I think the 10th anniversary of this is in the next couple of years, correct? For Mad Archmage. I think it was 2000.
I don't even know. Probably. I don't.
I think I want to say 2014, 13, 15. I don't know. Anyway, you need to kickstart that bitch and get a beautiful version with really nice artwork. And just do the definitive version of it, I think, because and you have the excuse it'll be the 10th anniversary. I gotta look this up now. I swear it's like
now you got me curious. I don't even know when my own book came out. Jeez.
We're all looking it up.
It came out so before it was in book form. Remember, you released it like in parts
on the blog. I did the free PDFs every month.
I remember I would read those blogs. I would love it whenever you'd have a free release because I would copy that down and ooh and ah over it and go over it for different rooms I could use in my own campaign, because there's lots of cool stuff. There's in jokes in there. There's it's just a really good. I always liked mega dungeons. You could steal a lot of it and stick it in your own mega dungeon, and it worked out.
January 2014 is when it went up.
There you go. You got 2 years, Joe. There you go.
2 years to make it happen. I think I can make it happen. I might. That's a great idea. I might just do that.
Because one of the things I think one of the things that really missed is I don't believe it had a lot of artwork or had very little artwork. So you need to start that.
Not inside, it didn't, but it had that art book, right? It had the separate.
That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, there's the art book. Yep. Yeah, the art book. All right. Well, 10th anniversary is coming up with the Castle of the Mad Archmage. Come on, man. You got to get it. But yeah, it's a really fun. As Eric said, there's a lot of adventuring there. You could probably adventure in there for years. And even if you didn't want to use it as written, I stole tons of stuff out of it. I would just, pull rooms out of it or whole areas out of it and use it in my own campaign. So it's very useful. It's very good. It's probably one of the purest mega dungeons in terms of it's just, even though it's, okay, let's face it, it's great. It's Castle Greyhawk, right? I mean, that's not what it says on there, but we all know what it is.
It's inspired by.
By sheerest coincidence, all of the staircases on my level 2 line up with the staircases on level 1 level 1 of Castle Zagig. I don't know how that could have happened. It was astronomical. Well, like monkeys on typewriters. It just happened that way.
That's something else. People don't understand that. So you published this after Castles Zagig came out, and so when Gary passed away, he and Jeff had only written the very basically first level, and then Gail put the kibosh on any further explorations into Castle Zagig. So you kind of took over the mantle, right? You said, okay, well,
that's what pushed me over the edge.
Yeah,
right. I wanted to finish it. I wanted it for my own campaign, and I figured I might as well share it.
And how many levels did it end up being? I don't even remember.
13 levels, and 13? There are a bunch of side levels too.
Right, there's some extensions to it.
It is well worth looking up on drive-through and getting it, because it's I don't even know how much. It's only $15 for a soft cover. It's $25 for the hardcover, and I think the art book's separate or something. You have an art book.
Yeah, there's a bundle in there too.
Yeah, get the bundle, man. That is well worth the money. Well worth it, guys.
Oh, so Bob G actually tells you the first level 2, was published in January 2009. I guess
Holy crap!
All on the old blog. And periodic updates continually added new levels until the final free version was released
July. Bob knows my stuff better than I do.
2010.
Wow. That's right. Yeah, Blackblade Publishing, and that I remember that because they had the rights for a while, but nothing ever happened with that. You took the rights back after about a year or so. And then,
no, it was a lot longer than that.
I couldn't remember.
Yeah, they were, because I had published mine, and then they wanted to take mine and kind of expand it and really do stuff with it, and it just never materialized, and there were several extensions, and it just never happened. I love them both. I don't better than any ill will, but just kind of the endless.
It happens. People get sidetracked, and you're sitting here going, "Hey, I want to publish my mega dungeon," and you can only wait a certain amount of time. I agree. So that's too bad that never happened. But what we got was still pretty good. And like I said, you still have, and now you have 2 more years. I'm going to hold you to it to make your 10th anniversary version. So. You need to get your 10th anniversary version out there. So.
Let me answer Cal's thing. If you can bring up Cal's new thing in the chat there. The extension of the Dro series, those are on my blog, Cal. Those are free downloads on my blog, greyhawkgrognard.com. One is my D4, which is an urban adventure set in Errol Kinlu, and it basically lets the players get the information they need to really finish the whole adventure series properly. And then I've also got a Q2, which is a replacement for Queen of the Demon Web Pits, that actually brings back the plot line with the Elder Elemental God, which was dropped in the original Q1.
And I did not know these were up here, so I'm going to bookmark this right now.
Yeah, it's there's at the top of the blog, you'll see free resources. There's a boatload of stuff in there. There's modules, there's articles, it's all kinds of stuff in there. There's also a prequel to Temple of Elemental Evil, Journey to Hamlet. I actually premiered that at ShireCon last year.
Oh, nice.
So Joe, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Eric.
Matt Melman says your D4 is very good, even if you pronounce. I'm going to probably pronounce it wrong. Drow. Wrong.
See, I pronounce it Dro. I just always did, and a lot, and those people who are wrong pronounce it Drow. But
I got you.
I go both ways on that one. What can I say?
I've heard that about you. Yes.
Too much info. TMI.
No, but so Joe, let's go back in time. And Eric and I often wax nostalgic about the golden age of blogs when we would log on every day, and there was. Grognardia, there was Greyhawk Grognard. I mean, all the great stuff back then.
Grognardia's back. He's been posting.
Yes, I know. I saw that. But so where did the whole Greyhawk Grognard come from? I mean, why the great interest in Greyhawk, and why the focus on Greyhawk stuff?
I have always loved Greyhawk even before it was published. The mentions that were in the Dungeon Master's Guide. I would insert them into my own homebrew campaigns. Like I would have a barony of Lum, or stuff like that, or I'd have Isles of Woe in my campaign. And then when they published the folio originally, that map, the Darlene maps, just
right.
And although over the years I've enjoyed Forgotten Realms back when it was still the gray box.
That was very good.
And when he was doing all of his articles in Dragon, I would photocopy them, keeping them in a binder. Before it was published, I was a big Realms fan, and then I was a big Dragonlance fan. Not so much some of the other settings that they did. I've played in a whole bunch, obviously, but but those other settings I enjoy. But I always kept going back to Greyhawk, and there's something just primal, because that is the setting that was literally the game was designed around. At least the game that I played, which was first edition. Right. That was the world made for my game. And it just plugged in so perfectly. And I don't know what. I mean, I'm sure there's an element of nostalgia for it in there now. But it's just I never gave up that urge to play in Greyhawk. And a big part of that early appeal was that it was so minimalist. Right? You had the folio and you had the gold box, which expanded a few things, which is a lot of which came out of Dragon Magazine. But that was pretty much it. Then you would have modules that would show a location in a particular place, like the Caverns of Sajkanth or Tomb of Horrors or something like that. But they didn't really give enormous amounts of detail that would bury you, like they ended up doing with Forgotten Realms. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it. They kind of went into that direction as years wore on. You can't really help yourself. You have to keep selling more products and new stuff, so you have to write stuff.
Right.
But I still think that level of brevity that gives DMs such a degree of freedom to create their own Greyhawk is something that you really don't see in a lot of other published settings.
Well, one of my favorite publications of all time is the Forgotten Realms Gray Box, because I contend it's one of the best sandboxes ever written. Because just using that, you've got your whole campaign world. It gives a little information on different You've got your Egyptian place, you got your place ruled by evil mages, you got your Shire-like place, and that's really all you need. And just take that gray box and just go crazy with it. That kind of thing disappeared once they started saying, okay, we're gonna have a supplement on every single area of the Forgotten Realms, and we're gonna go really in depth about all this. And that's one thing that Greyhawk never had happen to it, right? It never had, okay, we're gonna have a supplement on the Marklands and one on this and one on that.
They started
the two of
and Matt, I just want to answer Matt there. Matt is entirely right. That is one of the heart of my complaints about Living Greyhawk, is that it did start to, I mean, but it had to. It just started defining everything to a level of minutia that was impossible to keep up with. Okay. Especially now that it's all gone, and you have to kind of find it in little nooks and crannies of the internet. But it's then it became Realms-like, because then there was so much stuff to have to keep track of. And there was, there were the Marklands, and there was I Use the Evil, and there was Ivid the Undying.
Right.
But even those didn't just crush you with detail.
No, I quite like those, actually. I'm a big Carl Sargent fan.
There was more story going on to them than any of the Forgotten Realms. Like, you got the Forgotten Realms, Savage Frontiers. You throw all this shit at you, and it's a lot of adventure hooks. Don't get me wrong, but it doesn't give you an actual piece of meat to bite onto. It's just a lot of stuff to confuse you or intimidate you. Whereas even the later Greyhawk stuff, it seemed like there was, hey, we got a plot line going on. We're going to show you details of the geography and the politics, but there's a reason why we're telling you about it, because there's a storyline going on. Whereas with Forgotten Realms, it was just an information dump.
It was the fire hose,
yeah.
And you're right, the Living Greyhawk. So the area that I live in, our Living Greyhawk area, was the Bandit Kingdoms, which is, I think, it's a pretty cool thing. And I actually went to a few of the Living Greyhawk things until I realized I don't like 3rd edition. But I like Greyhawk, so I thought, okay, I'll go, and I would get the free stuff they'd give out. And it got to the point where I think they had written 108 adventures set in the Bandit Kingdoms, and I'm like, yeah, you don't need that. I mean, and that was the problem. Is it got so codified, and yes, we know every bandit group in the Bandit Kingdoms. We can tell you every member of that group. We can tell you what level they are, who their grandmother is. I mean, it just got so codified that it was exactly what Forgotten Realms was doing, which nobody liked at the time either. And you don't want to see that fate happen to Greyhawk. I mean, that was one of the great things about Greyhawk, is you just had the the big giant glossary, and then what was that booklet called? The big booklet, the big giant booklet with the Darlene map. And then you had the box set.
Well, there was the folio, there was the glossography, and the guide.
Folio, that was it. The glossography, yeah. And like I said, and really, Forgotten Realms, if you get past everything, if you just kept Forgotten Realms, the gray box, and everything that was 1st edition, which I believe was FR 1 through 5, and then after that's when it started getting a little over the top. Like, do we really need a supplement on that little area there and this area there? And it just kind of sucks all the uniqueness out of it and the imagination.
And when they first published the gray box, wasn't there was a kingdom that they promised they would never define.
Right, we're never going to do anything with this, and this is your kingdom to do whatever you want to with. And dang if I remember what it was, Joe, but I know what you're talking about.
And that lasted like a year and a half.
Yeah, and then they're like, oh, well, now because it wasn't even only that. They said we're never going to do anything on this. There was like 3 areas. It was that area and a couple, like the islands of something and this and that. And then after that became a cash cow. They're like, yeah, we can't keep that promise anymore. We're gonna develop every single area on the map to the utmost minutia. And And that's the problem with stuff like that, is it just gets to where, hey, it's great when your imagination can be unfettered, but when they start saying, yeah, we have a whole supplement now on the Red Wizards of Thay, and here's what they do, and here's what their spells are, and here's everything about them. It's much cooler when they're just this evil organization of wizards. You don't know really a lot about them, but you're like,
right.
I can make them into my bad guys.
Yeah, when you define it to that level, it takes away the mystery, which you don't really see a lot in Greyhawk outside of the living Greyhawk stuff. Yeah. Some things here and there. I didn't much care for the fact that they did the Veil of the Mage. I think that would have been better off. Just it's a mystery, and the DM can do it. And
it wasn't done very well, but yes,
that was not.
Oh yeah, John Sembia. Sembia was the name. Thank you, John. God, John knows everything. I swear. Pops on here, just pops it. Yeah, Sembia the Merchant Kingdom. That was the one that they weren't supposed to do anything with. That eventually, whatever. We lied to you. We lied, okay?
Well, they meant it when they said it. It's just that it became inconvenient later on.
Only a lie if you know it's untrue at the time.
Right.
I mean, don't get me wrong. There was some good. There was some good Forgotten Realms supplements. I thought there were some good Greyhawk supplements in there too. But yeah, after a while, I think it's an age-old problem with these companies. This is actually kind of what Paizo ran into in the last 3 or 4 years, is that you're a shark, right? You got to keep moving. You got to keep publishing. You can't just say, okay, here's our world. This is all there is. Boom. We're not going to do anything else. Well, no company does that, because
actually that's untrue. Columbia does it with Harn.
And Harn is crickets, though. When you go to a convention, is there anybody playing Harn? Crickets, because
it's got a very, very loyal fan base. They would not be chunking out those books if nobody was buying them.
But they're not making WotC style money, right? Or Paizo style money. That's the thing. Or even Frog Gun money. I mean, nobody's making. I mean, and
it takes a very special person to really grab onto Harn. I bought the original box set back in the day, and I was all excited until I started reading it and went, wow, this is pretty detailed and pretty realistic, and there's nothing I really can grab onto and say I like about it.
Harn had the best castles of any supplement published. Their castles are great, but you're right. I kind of read through it. I can steal these castles, but I don't want to play Harn. But the castles are great. I mean, I'll use castles all day long.
Another one that did a good job, I thought, of detailing the whole world was the Iron Crown Middle Earth stuff.
Yeah, they were very good. Those were
I loved those books.
Yes, very, very, very much worth seeking out even today. Because once again, I stole castles out of those. They had some of the greatest castles written. Yeah, Joe. Somebody else here has asked you a question. And I'm interested in knowing too. What are your thoughts on the Scarlet Brotherhood supplement for AD&D 2.0? And that was one of the ones that came out towards the end of the I think about 97 or so.
I like what they did with Hepmonoland. When they expanded out the continent, and they introduced the Tuv as a new human race and stuff. I liked the detail that they did in the Amadeo jungle and so forth. I didn't like the level of detail that they gave to the Scarlet Brotherhood. I thought that was a perfect example of what we were talking about earlier with the Wizards of Thay, of too much definition loses the mystery. And they took 2 or 3 paragraphs in the original folio and expanded it into a 128-page book, and really ruined the Scarlet Brotherhood in the process, because there was no mystery left. When something is that defined, when you shine the spotlight so brightly on something, you lose the opportunity to use it as an effective bad guy, because what's left to find.
Yeah, so people are saying that when it comes to the Middle Earth and ice stuff, it's probably going to be about $10,000 or more if you want to complete your collection these days.
That's true.
At Mepicon, which is in Pennsylvania here, a couple years ago, right? Yeah. I got a stack like this of Iron Crown stuff for $1 each. It was in their pre-auction thing, and nobody wanted it, and I just scooped it all up. Man.
God bless. I mean, I remember. See, my problem with Merp as a system, it was weird because as a setting, the setting material was simply spot on and amazing. But the actual game system for it, where every character theoretically could cast magic, didn't really fit the setting, and they carried it over into Merp, not just Rollmaster. The Merp characters had that stuff, so it was like, well, this isn't quite the same way, and it was hard to the pre-written adventures, not the I guess the setting modules, but the handful of adventures that were written for it kind of sucked. So I mean, it wasn't easy running for it, but I just remember that when we did run it, we had to use the critical tables from Rollmaster because they were just more detailed and disgusting. And
I remember Arm's Law when it first came out. On those, they had those parchment cardboard.
Oh God!
Way back. I mean, way before there was even a claw law. It was just Arm's Law, and those critical hit tables. Everybody was using them for the whole summer when they first came out.
Don't roll a 66.
Yeah,
66 was I think worse than getting a 00. I mean,
wasn't that the one where you slip on a vole and
it's like a fumble. It was a horrible fumble, but it was also a horrible critical for your opponent if you hit him with like 66. Like 66 was as bad, if not worse, than running 00 when it came to what happened. I still remember that. I think on all the critical tables, it always just stuck out. So, go figure. I bet there are legal PDFs floating around for these. Oh, you never know, Mike. You never know. But here's the funny thing, though, right? I mean, when I start like my hunt for old material, whether it's in PDF or whether it's in print, I don't get drawn to the old Merp stuff because my exciting memories of non-D&D play were things like RuneQuest, which was close to D&D. It wasn't overwhelming with charts, and it had very much a sandbox atmosphere if you ran Pavis and Big Rubble. And we didn't call it a sandbox. I didn't call it a sandbox. It just meant that my players weren't, starting a session with a dungeon in mind. They were exploring and stumbling into shit. And
for me, it was Call of Cthulhu. We played Call of Cthulhu in college all the time, in addition to D&D, and it was a grand old time. Also, Marvel Superheroes, the original Marvel Superheroes, was such a great game. So just so perfectly melded the source material because they had access to all the art from Marvel Comics, and the adventures were good. And that universal table they had, oh my God, it was such hit at exactly the right time because I was at my peak Marvel comic collecting at the time when it came out.
I was a DC fan at the time.
I still like you.
I know, I'm sure. The Mayfair DC game was heavy. I think the Marvel.
Well, I don't know. I think I liked Marvel pretty good. I was just, how I always have something sitting here. I was just showing
no show prep
some of my classic comics today.
Luke Cage.
I've got some. Luke, that was the original badass Luke Cage, not that was back when he was kicking ass on drug dealers and.
Oh, you're saying not the one from the Netflix series?
I like the Netflix Luke Cage. The Netflix Luke Cage was one of my favorites of the Netflix series.
Yeah, actually, the one I didn't like was the one whose title I can't remember because he was such an annoying character. The martial artist.
That would be Iron Fist.
Oh, Iron Fist. They did Iron Fist. They did Iron Fist to dirty in there. That was not a good.
Second season was much better, but that's a very low bar.
Yeah, he's a better character in the comics than he was in that sad excuse for a.
No, are you watching Moon Knight?
What was that?
I'm saving up. I'm saving up, Joe. I've got I think there's about 4 episodes. I'm gonna.
Episode 4 dropped today, so 2 more in theory.
Okay, good. So I'm saving up, and we'll probably. That's what we did with Hawkeye and with Falcon. We waited till they all dropped, and went ahead and watched them all. Because you get to watch one, you're like, oh man, I want to watch the next one, and you got to wait a week, and it's we're so spoiled in our society now.
My wife and I kind of like plan our lunches around it, right? So every Wednesday we have a lunch date because we're watching whatever the new Marvel or Star Wars thing is,
people don't understand the struggle. So back in the old days, the old days, you would have a show on. You'd have to wait a week to watch it, and if you missed an episode, you're just fucked. I mean, you may or may not ever see that episode again because they didn't automatically repeat episodes, or you couldn't go back and watch it. You'd be like watching Hill Street Blues and like, oh, what happened last? Oh,
and you'd have to wait for the summer to see what you missed.
I don't know.
Look at TV Guide. Is this an episode that I saw already or not?
I remember vividly when in Star Trek: The Next Generation, when Best of Both Worlds Part 1 aired.
Oh, yeah.
And this was original, so like you say, you had to wait 3 months until Part 2 dropped.
Sure.
And we were like, oh my God, no. When Riker just says fire and then cut. It was like, no.
Wait, well, hold on. And you better be in your seat with that because you don't know if you're going to see Part 2 again that year. I mean, you may see it next year or whatever. But so you had to be there like, oh, it's a Sunday night at whatever. Oh my God, I have a wedding. I'm just going to have to miss the wedding.
I miss the wedding, yeah.
I can't miss the Next Generation season the beginning of the next season. I mean, come on.
My mother's told the story that when my parents were, early on in their marriage, their friends would want to go out and hang out, and they'd be like, well, we can't go out that night. Why? Well, that's Star Trek. We can't miss Star Trek. There's no repeat.
Yeah.
It's not.
I'll tell you true story. This is true story. So who remembers the old TV show The Fugitive with David Jansen? Well, that was one of the few shows in the 60s that actually had an ending. They had a final episode where he has to catch the one-armed man. Well, they knew they were going to be canceled. They actually filmed a final episode. I remember back then, shows never filmed final episodes because that would remove the illusion that the show could just go on forever and ever and be shown in repeats. As a matter of fact, networks did not like final episodes because that meant at some time along the line, you'd have to put that episode at the end of, showing a whole season.
Didn't Time Tunnel have a final episode?
They did too, but they were only one season, and they knew they were only going to be one season. So
I thought they did too, where they both.
But most didn't. I mean, that's a big deal now to have a final episode. So they're going to. So after 4 years or 6 years, whatever, they're going to finally get to catch the one-armed man that killed his wife and framed him. And my wife and at the time they had tickets to go see the Cotton Bowl to go see a Dallas Cowboy game. My wife. My mom and my dad. Oh. And so they went there. So they go to the game, and they actually had a box seat, and the box seats had their private TV there. And my mom said that halfway through the game, you looked and you could see in all the boxes, everybody had The Fugitive on. Everybody was watching that final episode. She said, "You look, because I mean, it's like nobody ever did that. They were going to end this. He's going to catch the one-armed guy. So instead of watching the Cowboy game, everybody sit there. Well, I got the Cowboy game, but I got to see the last episode of The Fugitive. So it was a real struggle. You really had to, and if, like I said, if you missed something, you didn't know if you were going to see it for years. Or I remember I had the misfortune to miss the $6 Million Man Bigfoot episode, and my friends told me about it for like 2 years, and I was just so pissed because it sounded like the greatest thing ever. Now it wasn't; it was terrible. But at the time,
I had the bionic Bigfoot action figure.
Oh yes,
I had the bionic Bigfoot, and I had one. It was like this big. I had all that Steve Austin stuff. That was awesome.
But so yes, people are very spoiled now that you can just I think I'm going to wait till the end of The Mandalorian. I'll just watch because that's what I did with the Book of Boba Fett. I was like, I'll just watch it all. I'll just wait for it all to come out, drop, and and you don't have to worry about it. It's going to be on there. It's going to be on Disney Plus for the next 25 years. You can just pull it up and okay, I'm going to watch episode 3 of The Mandalorian. But yeah, kids nowadays, they have no clue how good they have.
Oh no,
the struggle was real. The struggle was absolutely
even with early time shifting, when you could actually record stuff on VHS, God forbid. And that's how I caught most of my Babylon 5 because I was working. I was working.
Oh yeah.
No choice. Mm-hmm. But you would see even a new VHS tape was shit quality when you looked at it. And God forbid you were using a tape that was recorded on a few times. It was wavy picture quality. It wasn't this high definition that everybody's used to seeing now. So, but I'll even say, listen, back when Firefly was on that first showing, I would be like, I would tell my girlfriend, go, listen, no, I know you want to go out. Listen, either you come to the house and we watch Firefly or I'll see you tomorrow morning.
And you were right, because Firefly lives one season and done. It was one and done.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not missing this. I caught the first, episode and I was hooked. I was like, I'm not giving this up.
We used to tape. Our big one was Star Trek Next Generation, because I want to believe, gosh, I might be wrong, but I think it came on Sunday night, and Sunday night might have been our D&D night. I'm almost positive. And so we would always tape it, and then we'd play. We'd have our D&D game, and then afterwards, my brother and I would watch Star Trek Next Generation with whoever stayed after the game if they wanted to see the Star Trek Next Generation. But yeah, you had to tape stuff, and woe to you if your tape recorder didn't go off. The tape broke.
I missed a big chunk of Babylon of Deep Space Nine because I was in basic training.
Oh yeah.
So I had to.
Yep.
But it was the Air Force, so as soon as I got out of basic, I got a TV. So it was great.
Oh, okay. Look at that. A gentleman's military. I've heard good things about the Air Force from friends that have gone through it.
The food was actually good.
That's what my dad said when I was.
For a lot of the time, I had a roommate.
Wow.
Which was stressful, having to share my dorm with somebody.
Oh, my heart bleeds for you. My heart. I'm getting overclamped. I'm sorry. Oh God.
So now, Swords of Cthulhu.
Yes.
Keep going. Let's roll. Let's go. What else do we need to know about swords?
Well, we need to know. Listen, folks. If you're looking, you can see we're already back for $15. Get you the PDF and the print on demand. You're going to have to pay a little additional for the POD, but it is basically cost at that point plus shipping. So really, it's a good deal. I've yet to have anything of Joe's that wasn't here. I'm going to lowball you, Joe. I'm going to say on a scale of 1 to 10, Joe's stuff consistently hits an 8.5 to a 10. So,
jeez. Thank you,
honestly, it's usable, and that's a usability system. All right, you're not going to. There are some people out there, some publishers. One who recently did a video naked with their latest release in front of their crotch. That puts out material that you're going to go, oh my God, this book is beautiful, and I want to leave it on the coffee table so when I have friends over, they ooh and ah over it, and it's not usable.
Oh, you may be talking. Oh, you're talking Lamentations. Okay, yes.
Oh, yes. Wait, you missed the video?
That was years ago, though, wasn't it?
I don't want to.
No, brand new video.
Because I remember he did one of those bear rug things.
This is a new one because if it worked once, it's going to work again, Joe. So let's do it.
Yes, sitting in a chair, legs spread.
That's right. He's going to give away the adventure he had in his crotch, right?
Right. So one lucky purchaser will get the one with the pubic hairs.
Lovely.
Nice. Well, you can say one thing for James. He's innovative in his
depravity
for trying to
whatever you want to call it. Hey, listen, James puts out the best looking product in our industry, bar none.
Quality's bar none. That's true.
But
usability is where you get issues most of the time. Yes. So, Joe's stuff is very usable. You're correct. Because what I like about a lot of Joe's stuff is you can pull stuff out that you want. You don't have to buy in lock, stock, and barrel. You can pull things out. Like his lore book and all this other stuff. You can just take stuff out of there. You don't need to use the whole thing.
And that's by design. If you want to have mountebanks in your game and not any of the other stuff, use the mountebank, and it'll plug in perfectly. And the classes in the new book are like that too. There's the cultist and the scholar. The cultist is a subclass of cleric, and there are 10 different types of cultists. They're like specialties. So there's a cultist of Cthulhu, there's 2 cultists of Nyarlathotep. There's one of Nyarlathotep, and there's also a cultist of Starry Wisdom, because Nyarlathotep just has all these different masks that he has, that he hides behind. And there's a whole bunch of new spells for them. Each one is a little bit different. They have special powers. One of them starts off with a type of insanity. but then gets a resistance to getting new insanities. There's all kinds of things like that for the cultist. The scholar is actually a split class of magic user. So remember the thief acrobat, where like you'd get 6th level as a thief, and then you could decide, oh, I want to become an acrobat too. It's kind of like that. You end at starting at 7th level, you can become a scholar, and you're spending more XP to go up in levels. You get a couple of benefits and powers and stuff, but you also get access to a whole new spell list, which are the Mythos spells. So, if you're just a regular magic user and you find the Necronomicon, you can't use those spells. You have to be this split class scholar.
Oh, okay.
Makes sense.
In order to do it.
Good
so
mechanic.
it's kind of a benefit if you're going to you warn your players ahead of time. We're going to have a Mythos kind of game. And when they get to the 7th level, your magic user says, okay, I'm going to spend the extra XP and have access to this stuff, and that way that gives them an incentive to seek out like the cults of ghouls and the Necronomicon and stuff like that.
So speaking of that, a Mythos type campaign, I'm going to put you on the spot, Joe. Spitball me a Mythos type campaign. Let's say I got my guys and they're about 5th level, and I want to use Swords of Cthulhu, and I want to make a Mythos type campaign. Spitball me an idea or a plot line there I could roll.
All right, you've got your regular campaign, right? It's you're rolling for characters have gotten up to 4th level, so just been an absolutely normal, plain kind of campaign. Then things start to happen. Things, not normal things, not the normal kind of things, not just orcs are raiding, not Sahuagin coming out of the ocean, but people are starting to have nightmares all throughout the town. And this individual has come into the town, and he's showing these wondrous works, these wondrous visions, and he's got these machines that spark with lightning. But the people are drawn to him, but at the same breath, they're repelled by him, and nobody knows why. So the PCs have to go there and find out what's going on. And there they find a cultist of Nyarlathotep who is using the technology of Nyarlathotep to expand his spells, which create visions of chaos. Why are they doing that? Turns out that Nyarlathotep has his eye on that village. But he's going about it subtly, carefully, because that's what Nyarlathotep does. He doesn't just manifest as an enormous tentacled beast and steps on the thing. No, he works through the shadows. He works through intermediaries. He's got 2, 3, 4 different cults working. None of them know they're all working for him. Some of them even work against each other, because he's just this master manipulator. He thinks 8, 9, 12, 20 steps ahead.
I like it. It reminds me a lot. I remember I ran. Oh dear, the big box set that came out in the 90s. Night Below. I read Night Below, and that kind of had the same kind of vibe that people are getting kidnapped. We don't know what's going on with them. You got to go find them, and you start finding there's this really, crazy conspiracy going on, and it turns out that Aboleth are kidnapping people, and it's it builds step by step by step. And I kind of like the structure of that. And that's sounds kind of like a Cthulhu campaign too. You kind of build the structure a little bit. Okay, this is going on. Okay, we think it's this, but it turns out it's this and this, and you go on from there. That's kind of how a Cthulhu story is, a Lovecraftian Cthulhu story. You builds and builds and builds, right, and then everything kind of busts loose. Then finally.
Well, that makes sense too, because I think it works best when your players aren't coming into it expecting Cthulhu, right? They're expecting a more standard fantasy campaign, and then it takes a twist,
right?
Which is kind of like one of the issues I have as, quote, an adult or later age gamer with Call of Cthulhu, is that you're going into it already knowing that your character is going to be facing shit that they don't want to face, or it's not like you're going into it expecting that you're going to play a game of, I don't know, gangbusters, and then Call of Cthulhu breaks out. That is how I.
Although that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool, though. I'm going to keep that in the back.
Yeah, to me,
I kind of like that.
That to me is how these games. I personally think, if you're going to use horror, it should be part of not a sleight of hand, but kind of your players and their characters are expecting ABC, and then before they know it, they're in XYZ, and that makes it really impactful. As opposed
Another
to
thing
knowing
about
you're going
Lovecraft
into this.
is that what a lot of people don't appreciate about Lovecraft is that he's not just horror. A lot of what he does is science fiction.
Okay.
You get a story like Cool Air, or a story like The Whisperer in Darkness, or something like that. That is a straight out sci-fi story. It's got a lot of horror elements to it, and that kind of stuff is in the book too, because there's a whole for those who've read Book of Lost Lore, I have a skill system in there which is based on something Gary wrote a long time ago, where you pay XP to get skills, right. And I carry that forward in this. And a lot of the skills I have in here are technology skills. So you could have the technology of Yith, which is one of the the ancient races, the great race of Yith, that they were able to transfer their minds millions of years and light years away, and then they would return to get to gather knowledge. If you find the right grimoires, you can sort of learn at least a few of their secrets. And it's the same way with the fungi from Yuggoth. You can learn how to extract brains and put them in cylinders to protect them while they journey through space and stuff. I've got one, the technology contra mortem, which kind of combines Cool Air and Herbert West Reanimator into a biological science where you can heal and you can keep dead people alive, but it's not magic because you're doing it through chemicals and stuff like that. And as you get higher skill levels, you can do more and more with these kinds of technology. But in order to use them, you have to make a choice, because you're going to say, oh, do I want to spend this 3,000 XP to learn a skill, or do I want to go up a level?
Right.
It actually gives you a real choice to make, because that skill could be really, really useful, but so could that extra hit die.
Yeah. All right. So we're slightly off topic, but John Miller wants to know about wanting spellcasters and OD&D. Illusionists seem underpowered compared to magic users. Druids seem underpowered compared to clerics. Does Joe or anyone mod these classes? And I'm going to flat out say, if you are running a regular campaign, an illusionist or a druid is the classes that fill in after you've filled in magic user, cleric, fighter, thief. Because unlike the fighter subclasses, they don't fulfill the same role as a ranger. Paladin can be your fighter. Your illusionist is going to miss out on, what is it, like 70% of the scrolls, because only 30% are illusionist scrolls or something like that. They won't be able to cast Fireball. Right. Much more useful, though, with Unearthed Arcana. I certainly broke the rules, but I found holes in the rules with Unearthed Arcana with an illusionist that worked out way too well for what it should have. Same thing with Druid. A Druid in most campaigns is kind of a piss poor cleric with no undead turning. They can fill a role, they can heal, but not as good. These characters are best in a larger group. Now, if you're only playing with 4 PCs, you're probably not going to have them. And again, Unearthed Arcana, my experience, makes them much more viable. Much more, the spell selection becomes useful, as opposed to the initial, which it just seemed to be like leftover magic user and cleric spells they got. It's like, oh well, we'll give you healing at second level. We'll just make you, So that's just my way of looking at it. What about you guys?
See, I use clerics a little differently than most people, because I take the specialty clerics that you got in
Greyhawk
Gold Box, and in the Greyhawk Adventures hardcover. I took those and I kind of ran with it. So my clerics usually have a lot more specialized spell lists than just the generic cleric. Okay. And like if you're not a cleric of a god of healing, chances are you're not going to have Cure Light Wounds. But also you're not going to be limited to non-edged weapons. So from that perspective, a druid becomes more or less just another specialty cleric.
Right. Okay.
Illusionist.
I play like Joe does. So yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah. Illusionist. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. You do.
No. Well, I was going to say that I basically have categories for clerics. There's cleric of healing, cleric of war, cleric of knowledge, cleric of nature, which is a druid, cleric of light, and like Joe said, they all have like the cleric of light. Their main purpose is to fight undead. They're really good against undead. Cleric of healing gets bonuses for heal spells, and then they're basically all like druids in their own way. Because then what a druid is just a cleric of nature, so they get all these they get all the nature oriented spells. But I think that what Joe said, I think that works really well. Is to just give everybody their own little niche and don't have we never liked generic clerics. That was one of the things we played first edition. That once second edition came out, we were real quick about to say, you know what, let's do this specialized cleric thing. That sounds really cool because cleric was always the weak sister class you gave the guy that just showed up at the last minute, didn't know what to play. Yep. Play a cleric, you can heal us when we get hurt, and just worry about just get cure light. Don't worry. What is the spell? No, don't worry about that spell. You're just gonna get 5 cure light spells.
Cure light spells at first level.
And okay, can I use a sword? No, you're using a mace. A mace sucks. Just use the mace, and you can turn undead. It's great, Well, I get to but you may not turn the undead if you're, So it was always kind of a weak. I thought the cleric was always kind of a looked over class. I thought that was one of the things that really improved it. One thing second edition that actually helped the game was that it made cleric something you want to play. Like, this is kind of cool. I want to play this cleric because he like Joe said, he's got specialized spells. He does special things. I mean, he's not just generic cleric number 25 or whatever.
It's funny because Rob Kuntz once on one of those online Q&A things, he mentioned that he had developed a cleric of the old ones, like a Cthulhu cleric for the original Greyhawk campaign. I've never seen that come to light, but I would give a lot to see that, to see what Rob's specialty Lovecraft cleric would look like. Because they actually had a temple of the old ones halfway between the city of Greyhawk and the castle. There was this old dungeon that nobody would go near because they didn't want to because it's freaking Cthulhu. So there are actually a lot of Cthulhu things in the original stuff, but that cleric is what made me think of that.
Another question for Joe: have you used Castle of the Mad Archmage in your home campaign? Did your players run through the whole thing? And do you run a Greyhawk campaign, or what are you playing?
Yes, no, yes. Although it's on hold. So yes, I've absolutely used Castle Mad Archmage. I ran it for a group of players for about 2 years, 2.5 years maybe, and they didn't come near to going through the whole thing. And that's kind of the point. One of my definitions of a mega dungeon is that you can't clear it. You cannot finish it. Right. Because by the time you can wipe out a section of the dungeon, but by the time you're done doing some of the others, those are kind of backfilled behind you. And there's new things in there, and things have started digging side levels and stuff. So there's, it's not really possible to run through the whole thing because there's always stuff coming back. To respawn, as the kids today say. I do run a campaign, but it's kind of on hold. It's an irregular thing now because of COVID mostly. Right. I did try to run an online game, and I hated every second of it. I want to be in front of people at a table. So most of my gaming lately has been at cons, and even that's been kind of sporadic again because of the plague.
Now, I got to say that I am blessed. I'm in an online group, but it's an online group of, let's see, Matt Jackson, Rob Conley, Greg Christopher, Joe the Lawyer, Tim Shorts, and a few others that pop in and pop out. So it's almost like the old school bloggers of old getting together and running games. And what's great about it is pretty much everybody is like me except for Rob. Rob is very technically inclined. So if he's doing like Roll20, he'll have like light sources and all that stuff is programmed in, and as you're moving your counter, you're seeing what you can actually see. But most everybody's like me. It's like, hey, it's either Fog of War or they're drawing the map out freehand. It's like playing at the table. But I think what you do need when it comes to playing at a VTT is you have to have a group that you are not just comfortable with, but it's the same type of people that you would have to have a fucking blast with playing in person. You will have a great time with playing on a VTT. VTT does knock it back maybe a notch. So like if you're going on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 stars might become 4 because you don't have the intimacy of being in front of everybody, but with voice and sometimes video, we seem to do a good job. But I don't doing a pickup game like I enjoy running games at conventions, and I've run pickup games for online conventions, or it doesn't work the same.
Yeah,
because I need to be able to make that contact, that eye contact with the players at my table. That's why if I run a game at a convention, I give my seat up. I'll put an extra player at the table because I don't sit. I walk around the table. I need to be right on top of people. I can get around that with a group of players that know me and I know we already have that relationship. But to do it with a pickup group, it is so much harder with the VTT. I don't see that there's a lot of parts of conventions that have moved online, and that one aspect is a lot harder to do for me. I know some people excel at it. I do not excel at it running games for people I don't know on a VTT because I just can't make those connections. I don't know how to read them. I know how to read this group of miscreants that I game with. I don't need to physically see it. I know what stupid comments Matt Jackson's going to make. You know, I know that Joe the lawyer is literally going to try to break the rule system if we're playtesting something because it's just his nature. You know, so I know this. I don't know that with a group of random people. So I that's where I don't do as well. So just really throw that out there. Now I'm going to catch up on the comments here. Cal says Paladins need some customization for the god they rep. I would say certainly, but I think that also depends on the level of campaign detailing that you're going for. Is this a beer and pretzels campaign? Then nobody really cares. Is this going to be a campaign that you're going to be running for a couple of years? Then that detail is going to be spot on and great.
Also, I don't like the idea of paladins for every alignment. I don't get away from me with your chaotic neutral paladin.
No, and I don't see that either. But I think that paladins of lawful good paladins that serve different gods, or even different, like they could be the same god, but maybe two countries have different. There's a schism in the church, right? And it's like
you see that in Greyhawk sometimes.
Yes,
with those like Foltest and St. Cuthbert. Foltest, you'll see, in one place he's more lawful good, and another place he's more lawful neutral. So you get that kind of gradation and subtlety.
Yeah, and I like that. But now, since you are here. You are not just a game designer, you're an adventure designer, you're a designer of rules. How much you do a lot of prep then in all this aspect, but when it comes to, I don't know, your next game session,
I wing it.
All right. See that's important. And I think
I prep nothing. I've got a lot of general prep that I do, but I don't prep for a specific session. I'll have a lot of things that I could pick and choose because I run a very sandboxy campaign. There's a lot of threads that players can tug on and follow if they want to, but I have no way of knowing what they're going to do. So it's not easy for me to prep for next Friday night, the players are going to go here. My game doesn't work that way. So I've got a lot of things I can pluck out of the air, but I don't prep for specific sessions.
Okay. No, and see that, and that's important because I am more of an improv style DM if I'm running a campaign. Different again. When you're running at a convention, you're running with something that's prepared.
Right. That's a different story because you can just say you're at the dungeon entrance.
Right.
Yeah.
But when I'm running something in a campaign, that loosey goosey aspect, and the problem I find with some ways of addressing the loosey goosey is you can over prepare. You can have material for every direction your PC is going, and you spend all the time and they go in one direction, and now 90% of your material that you spent getting ready for is not usable. I'd rather have material that I can plop and put depending on what my players' decisions are, as opposed to having every potential option mapped out for the next session, because that is not just insanity, it's going to burn you out as DM prep.
Well, plus, players are perverse that way. They will go anywhere except the places you have planned.
Yes,
that's just what true. They do. So there's a great web comic out there, and it's like the one figure is this NPC that I've spent all this time detailing that has the location of the next adventure, and then it's got a cluster of the PCs around. The barmaid I'd never bothered to name.
I tell my players when I prepare, because I do prepare a session like Joe, and I like to write down, hit points or monsters or whatever. I don't railroad, but I plan ahead. But I tell my players, I ask them before the next session, I said, what do you guys want to do next session?
Definitely.
So because I'm not going to sit here and prepare something for your ship voyage, and you're going to decide 5 minutes into the game, like, you know what, that ship idea was crap. We're going to go climb the mountain now. And then I'm just sitting there like, okay.
You're climbing it in a ship.
But I wrote up this whole crew and I did this and that. So I do make them give me a little bit of direction, where they might want to go. And we actually, what's kind of cool about modern technology, and I would have loved this as a kid, is we have a Facebook page set up for our campaign. And we post on the Facebook page, and I have updates after every session. I put an update like, here's what happened. I have a cast of characters. I have any important maps or stuff I put up on the page. And so I have a central place we can go to. And of course, we also go there and we who can play Sunday? Who can play Saturday? So it serves a lot of purposes. I wish I'd had that when I was a kid. That would have been great.
Oh God.
But we'll go there and I'll say, hey, so you're going to go to the Mad Archmage's Lair next time, right? Everybody's into that. Okay. Yeah. We're all going to do that. Yeah. We're going, we're going to head there. Okay. So now I know I can kind of set it up a little bit. I can pull my monster miniatures out and get my miniatures all ready, because one of the main complaints I get is I have hundreds of monster miniatures, and yet when the time comes to they're fighting a minotaur, I pull out generic orc guy to put there. Like, you have a minotaur figure. I go, I don't know where it's at. I have 100 boxes here. It's like, so that helps me do that, so I can prepare my miniatures, so the people don't get all upset and like, oh man, I know you had a green dragon. I have a green dragon. I don't know where he's at. So.
See, I don't, even face-to-face games, I don't like using minis unless I was running like was it the Mouth of Doom, when we were using a 3D terrain. Then minis were fine, but I prefer theater of the mind. I won't even use pogs on the VTT. I'm just going to point on the screen as to where the adversaries are, where you are. Maybe I'll draw something real quick, but I don't.
Come on,
man.
Come on, you want to? This guy's too cool. This guy's too cool to not use if you have a beholder and they're like, holy shit, we're going to get our ass kicked. I mean, that's, when you say, okay, there's a beholder in front of you, like, yeah, whatever. When you throw this guy on the table, like, holy fuck, we're fucked. And so, yeah.
No. And Mike, that certainly is a good part of the aspect. But I personally find that once you start putting minis and pogs or, whatever you're putting down on the screen or on the table, it goes from the theater of the mind to a tactical game. And I know the roots of the game are in wargaming, but the game that I play, and I was not rooted in wargaming, was always theater of the mind. Explain to me what you're doing.
And that is a great point, because my players are extremely tactical. They are tactical to a tactical extreme. So that makes a lot of sense there. That's true. That they will map out the room and they want to know, is this 30 by 40 with how big is, and they map it all out. They draw on the mat. They got all their guys. So yes, you're right. For a more tactical game, miniatures are necessarily.
Yeah,
but if you're doing theater of the mind, don't worry about it.
I think looking at that mini of the Beholder you just held up, I think you could also make a case that the choice of miniatures can signal a what's the word I'm looking for? The kind of game you're playing. So when you break out that, which I'm assuming is either a WotC or Reaper Bones or something like that, when you break out that figure, I think that communicates a certain style. When I break out my old Grenadiers or Ralparthas,
oh yeah,
I think it's a subtle thing.
I got that too, Joe. Come on, man.
Style of play.
Well, I will say, so in my personal game, all my minis for characters are all lead, not pewter, and they're all old school and they're all painted. Now, I reserve the right because, let's face it, lead Beholder miniatures suck for the most part. I will pull out a plastic miniature every once in a while, but for characters, they must use a lead old school mini that was probably painted in 1981, which I still have boxes of those. So I pull those.
That's what I use.
But the monsters, I
can't buy new figures. I can't buy new figures.
No, I don't like the
monsters because
they're not the right size.
They're all 28 heroic
28 millimeter. Yeah, they're all 28. Exactly.
Thank you, Games Workshop.
I have the same issue, yeah, because now Reapers do all 28. So yeah, you can't find anything that's
But now it's not even 28. It's heroic 28, which is really 30.
Oh
yeah, put them side by side, and one guy looks like a guy whose pituitary gland stopped working. The other guy looks like he's been taking roids for 3 years. Because it's true. I mean, they're just
I can't use them.
Totally
I have to go back to the old.
I'm with you on that. Yeah. But there's plenty of. That's the great thing. There's plenty of Grenadier and gosh, all the other heritage minis still out there. I have tons of them that still aren't even painted. I've got all the old Julie Guthrie ones. We've got all those painted. So we've got hundreds of painted minis that are of scale. And so it's sort of cool because when I go to a convention, I run a game and I bring my box of minis, and the look on people's face when they pop that box up, because I tell them, choose a character out of this box, just the way their faces light up, because you can tell the memories are hitting them like, oh my God, I used this Julie Guthrie mini, 25 years ago or 30 years ago. So I love the whole nostalgic aspect of, just pulling those out, or the Grenadier figures. Oh my God, this is the halfling with the torch. I used to use him back in 1980. And I agree that sets the whole kind of mood to it. You're like, we're going old school. We're going old school here. Yeah.
You can actually still buy the Grenadiers, the Parthas, and the minifigs. Minifigs are in England. Parthas are Iron Wind metals that are out in Wisconsin. And there's a place in Italy that is still doing most of the old Grenadiers out of the same molds.
Really?
See that? Well, one of these days we'll see we'll reprint the Guthries, because I'll tell you where the Julie Guthrie's molds are. They're in the warehouse right back here. We have all the Julie Guthrie molds that Doug bought 7 years ago that we've just sat on the shelf, and so we're still working towards getting those published eventually. But yeah, and those are great to look through. You go in the molds, you pull up the mold, you're like, holy crap, I remember this guy. This is the druid, or this is the magic user. And yeah, there's a powerful nostalgic thing there when you pull those miniatures out, and just you get one of these boxes here, and this is the Dragon Lord's reprint of the Grenadier. But just you look at a character and like you go, oh yeah, they had the guy drinking the potion bottle. I remember he was my character. It's just so cool because you'll remember a particular adventure you even use that character in. And I find that happens a lot with my players when I do my miniatures. They'll pull a miniature, and go, oh my God, this was my character. Yeah, there you go. And so that it's really, mnemonic devices like that are very important when you play games. I mean, there's a lot of things that come to play, but definitely mnemonic things where they connect back to when they were first playing. That happens with me with music a lot too, because sometimes I'll hear a song. I mean, when I was in high school, I was a big Zeppelin guy, because I just got into Zeppelin. So nowadays, even today, I can hear a Zeppelin song, and that brings me back to, I remember we played Frost Giant, man. We were playing the Immigrant song. We had the Immigrant song cranked up when we did Frost Giant, and things like that. So
it's funny you should say that, because there are songs. Because back in the day, I would during the summers I would stay up till 3, 4, 5 in the morning painting minis, and I would have MTV on. And there are still to this day certain songs I hear on the radio that I associate with painting a specific mini.
Wow.
Like, okay, I remember this was playing when I painted this this draw with with such and such. So
the senses. Well, the senses are very powerful. I mean, smell is sometimes you have a particular smell can bring you back. Like you go to a bookstore and you hit that smell hits you and you're like, oh my God, I remember going to a bookstore when I was 8 years old, but sounds like that too. You can, like you said, sound. I mean, music is very important. And a lot of times the soundtrack of our lives, it's intertwined with D&D, isn't it? I mean, the first time you got a module or the first time you played a game, like I said, we had one whole summer where we played the Giant series. And one of my best friends and I, Doug, who still games with me, not Doug Ray, but another Doug, and we were getting into Zeppelin. That was our big band. Like, oh my gosh, Zeppelin's great. This is like 1979 or so. We're just, oh man, they're awesome. And so the Giant series in my mind is always connected to Zeppelin because I can remember specific songs being played at specific dungeons, and we would have a cassette player right there on the table. We're playing the music, and yeah, it absolutely brings me back to that spot when I hear these songs where I'm driving in the car or something. So it's an important mnemonic device like that important. But I mean, miniatures are very much, that's why I like miniatures so much. I know people like Eric says, oh, it's theater to mind, we don't use miniatures. And I'm like, you're crazy, man. We always use miniatures. Miniatures are so connected to D&D with me that they're it's like dice. They're a whole separate area of, when I see certain dice now, I'm like, oh my God, those are the dice. We use that set of dice, that Chesic dice was the one we used. And miniatures hit me the same way. Miniatures are very,
because we couldn't afford, like I had, my box set of miniatures, I think, was the Grenadier Woodland Adventurers.
Oh, yeah.
Had the goddamn halfling with the crossbow behind the I mean, the worst miniature you'd ever want.
The Gnome King on the stump?
Yeah. Yes. It's like a slab of lead. It's like, what the hell is this? How useful is this in any setting but behind a tree stump? But when we used miniatures, we usually had one for every PC, and yeah, we would show marching order, and that's what. And if somebody got knocked down, somebody was killed or unconscious, you remove them from the table. But we didn't actually use them tactically because we never had the monsters. We never had. We tried it once using like dice, and then you forgot the clear 12 die as opposed to the crystal 8-sided die I don't fucking remember what switch. Just put X's on the map and just go from there. So we just couldn't. I mean, for us, from my pocket as the general DM, I was buying gaming material, books. I was buying I was buying Pace Setter and West End Games, and I was the one that was buying all that stuff. And I was the only one occasionally painting miniatures in my group. Nobody else wanted that.
See, for me, I came from a wargaming background.
You see, that's different.
Yeah, I came from SPI and Avalon
I'm
Hill.
With Joe, yeah.
And miniatures and stuff
Joe,
like that.
Yeah.
So for me, the miniatures was kind of like, okay, I understand this. That's actually how I found D&D, was in a miniatures catalog. And they all of a sudden, all this fantasy stuff started to show up, and I was like, what's going on here? But it's and by the way, if there are any wargamers out there, I will be at Historicon this year down in Lancaster, which is a blast.
Really,
it's a whole weekend con. It's enormous. It's easily as big as Gary Con. And it's all historical. Well, it's all miniatures wargaming, and it's a lot of historical stuff. But there's also fantasy and sci-fi and all the rest.
Lancaster's not too far. No,
I used to love it. I used to love wargame cons because you always used to get great deal on RPG stuff at wargame cons because these war guys would bring all their old models.
I don't like it anymore.
I don't like it anymore. I'm back to playing D-Guts. I don't want to play this anymore.
Right. So but I started going a couple years ago, and it's like coming home. I really enjoyed pushing the level.
We did not come from wargaming, although we did play Ogre. But after we got introduced to D&D, we played Ogre, GEV. I tried doing the war games, and I tried the double blind system from Games on a Workshop. That was kind of cool. I think we had the Battle of oh god, Turek. I can't remember. But I only had one other player who wanted to play, and then when he turned 18, he went into the Air Force, and that was the last we saw of him. So nobody else wanted to play war games. But Cal has a question. I think that's the one he wanted me to circle back. So just like our favorite redhead on TV, I'll circle back. I got that. Would you show art at the appropriate time? And I used to love things like. Oh God! Any of the classic adventures
Tomb of Horrors
had visuals. Tomb of Horrors.
Mm-hmm.
It had the visuals that because the visuals usually meant there was a fucking trap, and that your players had to figure out, looking at it, what the trap was that was going to kill their ass. But yeah, I would certainly use visuals, but a lot of the I am not an artist. So I would have to do a lot of research if I wanted to make sure I could find the proper picture or graph or whatever I need for whatever scene. But generally speaking, if it's going to take a lot of work for me to find it, because I'm obviously not drawing it myself, it's probably not going to happen unless it's being supplied by a pre-written adventure.
Which is why I included it in Castle Mad Archmage. That was a deliberate homage to Moacan and Tomb of Horrors and those things that had that separate, illustration book. Show this to your players when they reach room 9.
One of the first things I did when I got a little cash was I had people draw characters in my campaign so I could show my players. And I remember getting Jason Braun when I first met him. He drew the bad guy in my campaign that I was running at the time. But I still have the art for that. It's pretty cool because draw me a picture of the bad guy's sword, and something else so I could just show the characters. And they thought that was the coolest thing ever because none of them had ever thought about, whoa, you actually contact a professional artist that got you to draw your stuff. Like, it wasn't really that expensive, but it's cool. But one of the things I did starting back in the 80s was I would go through, especially National Geographics, and I would cut pictures out of forests. Nowadays, you don't have to do that because you have Google, right? You just go Google Arctic, and then there's 80 million pictures of Arctic, and you can copy the ones, paste the ones you want. Back then, I would go through National Geographics, and I would cut these pictures out of glaciers or jungle forests. And when they went in that kind of terrain, I would pull it up, and I thought that was great. Those were great. Those helped make the area real, because you would show how many pictures in D&D adventures are there really of jungles? Like 2 modules had 3 pictures. I mean, so I would have this giant 2-page spread. Here's what the jungle looks like. Whoa. Oh, no wonder we can't find the ogre. That thing's a mess there. Yeah, that's what it looks like. You can't see a thing. So stuff like that. I love things like that. I love visual representations. I think there's, like we were talking about earlier, about sounds and about miniatures. It's just another mnemonic device that helps your game because people look at that and they remember it and they can place themselves there. I remember one time there was something, character was going to do something. They were going to jump half a mile and fall half a mile. And I was like, do you realize how much half a mile is? So I started Googling it. And it turns out the tallest skyscraper in Dallas is about half a mile. So I showed him. I said, "You're falling this far. You're going to splatter. I think you make your save. You're splattered. I don't care. I don't care what the dice say. You're going to be a pancake if you fall." Oh, yeah, that's pretty far, man. No, yeah, it's really far.
So Matt says, "I went through National Geographic is one of those lines." Yes,
I had that same thought.
Yes. We're glad that you were cutting out pictures of glaciers and such. Obviously, you read it for the articles.
He only reads it for the jungle pictures.
Let me tell you something else too. You know what National Geographic came in handy? I went to a Half Price Books once about 30 years ago and found a bunch of 1920s National Geographics. Those were great handouts for Call of Cthulhu games or back, nice. I would hand those out around the table like, hey, they're going to go, because every once in a while they'd have a story. It's like our reporter goes to the Nile. Well, this is back when not everybody went to the Nile and you could go there and die of, yellow fever. And they would have lushly, all these pictures, just beautiful pictures of all this stuff. And I hand those out at games, say, hey, here's back then you used to be able to go in Half Price Books. You get a 1920 National Geographic for $5, or something like that. And it was great. The players love that stuff because you just flip through there and you get an idea of this is what it looked like at the time of the, Call of Cthulhu was actually going on in the 20s. And a few years later, they actually came out with a full DVD set of all the National Geographics, I think from 1910 to the present. I went ahead and splurged on that. I still have that. So very, very good for also not just Call of Cthulhu games, but if you run something like Daredevils or Gangbusters or anything that has in a certain time period, that stuff's invaluable.
Perfect. All right, let's. I look at that. I caught up with all the comments.
God, I'm getting hammered.
Zooming past the appropriate comments.
Well, yeah, I mean, somebody has to
make it go away.
Make it no. It's okay. Those are the ones that somebody will take a screenshot of. That's all right. Hey, at least I learned how to get rid of the goddamn porn spammers that were always coming in. Yeah, that's when you know you've reached a certain level of popularity. When every live stream gets hit with porn spammers.
Speaking of which, oh wait, no.
Yeah, oh wait, we can go there now. Listen, we have not really touched on gaming stupid tonight. All right, we've touched on a lot of good gaming.
Because we're talking to Joe, and Joe's not gaming stupid. We didn't have time. No. We got so much stuff to talk about with him. So
I am such a fascinating guy, actually.
Right. But now, folks, there is something that was briefly out of print. And when I say out of print, it was in print, and then it got pulled, but you can still find the PDF, but now it is in print again. So now Joe is like me. He got his print copy early on.
I ordered mine today. I ordered my copy today.
But I believe Joe has the first print of
ta-da
Tsar Frontiers, not genuine. Now you might be looking at that and saying, "Well, that says Star Frontiers," and it does. The new ones, or the second prints, will say Tsar Frontiers.
Tsar, yeah, TSAR, Tsar Frontiers. Yes.
Yes. I love.
It's funny. I just read the preview on drive-through and I was rolling, and so I can't wait to get the full. And I just think it's amazing whoever did the parody came out with the parody before the original came out, which
they managed to zoom it out before
there's no original written. I mean, we know this. There's no original. There's nothing written for this. So that's just hilarious that the parody came. It's good. It's a good parody, man. It is really good stuff. Highly recommended for $20. Highly recommended.
Yeah, they're not making profit on this parody. You can get the PDF for free on drive-through. So on
drive-through?
The PDF is free on drive-through.
Wow.
As of today, it just started today, right?
Well, the PDF was up there earlier.
Oh, okay.
As SAR Frontiers.
I thought it was through Lulu.
Lulu.
No,
it was on Lulu. It was pulled from Lulu. It was on itch.io for the PDF. I got mine on Lulu too. But now, and then they put up the PDF on drive-through. So, I mean, honestly, you got to figure your eyes are going to look at it, and your eyes are going to do what eyes do. Your eyes are going to read it as Star Frontiers, but it isn't spelled that way on the cover because it isn't Star Frontiers.
It's funny, and it's funny. There's a bunch of genius stuff in there. I mean, I cannot just from reading the preview, I can't more highly recommend it. Let's just say that I read the preview and I went and said, I'm getting two, one for the midnight auction. So we can put it up in the midnight auction, which, by the way, the midnight auction, it may be signed wink, wink, wink by certain people. So maybe a real signature, maybe not. I don't know.
Being that I am mentioned in it, you'll have at least one legitimate signature because I can put a legitimate signature in it.
There may be some illegitimate signatures. It's the midnight auction. So
the midnight auction. The devil does as the devil does. We all know that. Okay, but it's playable. Listen, what Giant Lands came out. I got to give Giant Lands credit where credit is due. It is in print. It is at a discounted price now, or at least it was, because they have I think a garage full of this shit. Giant Lands looks pretty, but I don't believe it is playable. It doesn't appear to be internally consistent. This, it looks very playable. That blows my mind that a parody for a game that isn't even released yet could come out and be playable. Now, I've heard that it's probably playable because it's based on the third edition SRD Modern Future and draws some inspiration from a fan-written Star Frontiers third edition version that was up on one of the fan sites. Whatever. Listen, there is some editing and layout design here that will make you think that the newest version of TSR had their hand in this.
Well, let's just say there's a bunch of misspellings in there that aren't off the mark very far. Let's put it that way.
No.
The real writers of new TSR
and the sticky notes. You know, Matt is right in the comments. The sticky notes are just freaking hilarious.
Oh my god! I when I first saw it, and the first time I saw the sticky note, I actually had to stop and go, "Is this a real No, it's just a graphic sticky note. It's that good. It's that." And then you start reading it, and the Lanasian comments, which I will phrase it that way, are true to the character that we have seen online. So there's no better imitation or flattery than humor.
They capture his voice.
Yes, and they certainly do. I'm not saying it's a voice that you would want to capture in normal circumstances, but they do a great job. Now, as I happen to, I'm fairly sure I know the individual who put this together, and I gotta say that they did an amazing job. 2 thumbs up if you get the chance to watch this later. You've done an amazing job, and yes, I was giggling when I saw my mentions in there. So again, so well, when you can get parodied in a parody, that is like multiple levels of bizarreness. Although now, since we're talking about that, TSR, new TSR, T3R, however you
I like 3SR.
3SR. There's so many different ways people are doing this. They apparently shipped out Dungeon Crawl. There was a horribly done unboxing video that, if you have any kind of suicidal tendencies, might put you over the edge. So I'm not suggesting that you watch it, but it actually exists. All right, and Vince Florio's Cults of not Abandon, Abaddon.
My God!
Yeah, that actually exists in physical copies. I am still waiting on mine. Mine are being shipped to a third party because anthrax or some kind of venereal disease smeared on my property would not be something I'd be looking forward to.
It's called the adventure is the Cult of Abaddon, which is the name of, I think, a mythological or a Babylonian god of evil. Everybody that I so far have seen, even from Dewey TSR, has pronounced it the Cult of Abandon. There's no N in there, and it just drives me crazy to hear people say that. And I watched a review today where the guy who is a shill for new TSR pronounced it incorrectly at least half a dozen times. He called it the Cult of Abandon, and that just drives me crazy. So I don't know what the solution is, except whenever you have a title for a module, I guess make sure you don't use words like abandon. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So yeah,
it does exist, so we can say that TSR has published nothing. They've actually published.
It just hasn't been mailed. It just hasn't been mailed out apparently yet.
Everybody,
because people we know that have it
got it at a convention.
Bought it at the convention. Yeah, they bought it at TSR Con or whatever that thing was. They didn't buy it they didn't get it in the mail, so they still haven't shipped copies, I believe. But it does exist. They
had copies in mailers. Only problem is they apparently haven't really joined the recent century. So yes, everything was postage paid, ready to go out, but no shipping info was available to anybody because they said they weren't able to do such because they're an old school company. But the photo of the product that was packaged included somebody's address and name that you could read off the top of the pile.
Okay.
So they doxed one of their customers.
Yes. So,
God.
but that is literally par for the course. And the other update is for the real Star Frontiers, not going to happen. New Genesis, whatever. Supposedly, this was already in print and print copies were available, but they really weren't. But now they're shipping, but they really aren't. But it's beta copies that are shipping to Dave, who will then send copies out to beta playtesters. There's no PDF going to be available because of, piracy. And so I've mentioned this before. I will mention this again. $100 bounty for a scan of the PDF of or even photos of the actual Star Frontiers, not genuine, New Genesis, $100 bounty and drive-through gift certificate. If somebody gets me a complete,
you might just want to say $1 million bounty, but I understand $100 because
$100 bounty. It's listen. I can pay it. I'm not. That's how.
You're not going to be paying it though. You're not going to have to pay it just like you wouldn't have to pay $1 million bounty. But still,
I'm just putting it out there. It's just it's like consider me WikiLeaks of the OSR. I just want to get it so I can leak it out there. Because why not? It's got to be entertaining. I've seen the cards that they've edited for this.
Can I ask you something that we haven't talked about yet? So I'm just gonna totally and joke and just stick with this on this one. This is totally out of the blue.
Yeah.
But this week there was a lot of comments on the tavern that along the lines of, why are you giving this guy publicity? You know what I'm talking about, right? There was some comments like, hey, you need to stop talking about this guy because all you're doing is giving him free publicity. And this is the kind of thing that he thrives on. He loves this stuff. He loves to be talked about. Why are you doing this? You need to just ignore him. What would you say to that? Like I said, I'm just totally surprised.
Go ahead.
Let me go first. I understand the sentiment.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think that it is outweighed by the warning factor, because what's going on is they're pulling in people who don't know who they are.
Right. Exactly.
More sincere.
They think they're the original TSR.
Right. They're in my opinion, because you got to say that nowadays. All this is my opinion. Is that they are deliberately trying to obfuscate what they really are. They're trying to say, they're trying to put into people's minds that they really are the original TSR, and that they really have a chance of winning this lawsuit against Wizards of the Coast, and that they really are a real game company that publishes stuff. And they're trying, and while yes, it is. There is the idea that you are publicizing them.
Hmm?
That publicity is also going to be a warning for people who might otherwise be fooled by them. That yes, you're publicizing them, but you're also it's good publicity from the standpoint of somebody who wants to protect innocent people from being duped.
Thank you. Well, and that is certainly a large part of it. I mean, it's the reason why. Listen, I had people tell me, "Oh, you should stop covering the Gygax Memorial Fund, and Gail is a little old lady, and you shouldn't be focusing on that." I was told, similar with Ken Whitman, I should leave Ken Whitman alone. I was being a bully with Ken Whitman, who was trying his darndest to scam this community. My background, for those that don't know, I spent 20 years in the NYPD. But as a sergeant, I spent about half my career as a sergeant supervising investigators in internal affairs. I wasn't looking for guilt or innocence. We were looking for the truth. All right, because the truth is what we want to know. So why does, in my opinion, TSR, Justin Lanasa, Dave Johnson, even to a large extent, I guess you have to say Ernie at this point, Ernie Gygax, why do they not want my attention? And honestly, so there are people out there saying, "Oh, Tenkar gives them too much attention. That's what they want." No, it's not what they want. Okay, because again, I am showing as Jermore says, he concurs with the Greyhawk Grognard, Tenkar's performing a public service. I didn't know about any of this shadiness because I just wasn't following the industry that closely.
Exactly.
Listen, if you are wired in, you don't need me to tell you, right? But honestly, doing due diligence on any of this stuff is not something that the average person is going to do. If you've been away from the hobby and you come back and you see somebody saying, "Oh, the original publishers of Dungeons and Dragons are back." Oh, TSR is back.
And that's not, we're not just throwing that out there. Eric and I have both dealt with people personally who actually believe that, who thought that, hey, and I had questions sent to me versus via PM. Why are you picking on TSR? I mean, I thought you were an old school guy, and I had to explain the situation. Once I explained, it was like, oh my God, why? Well, they said Gary Gygax Jr. worked for him, which is another attempt at obfuscation too, because it's Ernie Gygax, it's not Gary Gygax Jr. And so there are people out there that, believe it or not, that have been away from the hobby for 10 or 20 years, and I personally talked to a guy who bought Giant Lands, and he was so disappointed when he got it because he thought it was going to be, because this is back when Lanasa and Dionheart were buddies, and Lanasa was really pushing Giant Lands. He bought it thinking, well, it's written by Gary Gygax Jr. and Jim Ward. It's going to be old school, and he got it. And he was really disappointed, but he had been out of the hobby for about 20 years. He did not know what was going on. And once I explained all the aerobatics and gymnastics that went on with the name, he's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I bought something I'm never going to use. That I don't even want now.
That is the same pain that many of us felt when we bought Cyborg Commando.
That was God, that was. No. But you know what? Cyborg Commando is probably more playable than Giant Lands.
Maybe, but that's a low bar.
Although the production quality is higher on Giant Lands, I will give that credit. I will certainly give that credit.
But yeah, Eric is right. I just wanted to ask that because I saw, I don't think this is a conspiracy. I just think a lot of people thought this at the same time, because some of the people asking the question, I think, were being sincere. You know, hey, why are you still talking about this guy? And you know, a lot of it has to, I mean, there's a lot of reasons that people talk about things like that. But I agree is that, you know, when the Ken Whitmans of the world are allowed to, and that was the big example that we've always had was Ken Whitman, because I remember when Ken Whitman was really hitting it. I mean, people were hitting Eric with that. Why do you keep talking about Ken Whitman? I mean, come on. And you know what? Here we are, a few years later. I bet you a lot of people online don't know who Ken Whitman is now because, you know, he's not being talked about all the time. And they would have no clue if Ken Whitman, but you know what? If Ken Whitman tried to start another Kickstarter, guess what? We'd be all over that shit. We wouldn't let it happen again.
White on rice. And again, you know, this is my background. I don't like people that prey on my community. I don't like people that take advantage of those that don't know, or those that just want to believe something that, like, oh, but what it would be a miracle. It would be an amazing Christmas if TSR was back and they were publishing Dungeons and Dragons, and oh my God, look at this. But the reality is, they're not back. Okay, and it is the equivalent of, at best, carpetbaggers, and at worst, con men. This is my opinion. All right. Again, I stand on my opinion. Now, I've been told, even recently, well, you know, if you stop talking about them, maybe you could get them with harassment suit. Good luck on that. All right, because I've been doxxed, just because I know a lot of what Justin says and does behind the scenes does not mean that a harassment suit's going to go through. This is actually the United States. It's a very hard bar to hit. But I will always bring receipts to the table. So when Mike and I when we talk about stuff that new TSR is doing or Dave Johnson's latest fiasco, I bring screenshots. Okay, so you can't.
We've never had to make up one story. We have not even embellished a story yet having to do with this. I mean, we look, just absolutely sticking by the facts. It's bad enough, right? I mean, we never have embellished or made up anything about this,
right? And I'll be honest with you, there is stuff that Mike and I know that we don't talk about because I can't bring the receipts, and if I can't bring the receipts, I'm not going to talk about it. So. Yeah. When I can present receipts, I will. To me, that's the only way you can present something like this. If the public can look at, like, we've already talked about this with games, right? Like, hey, visuals. You need visuals. Well, you need proof, right? If you're saying that you need tokens in your game because you want to see where things are, you want to think tactically. If I'm going to talk about something, if I'm going to say this company, this publisher is doing something. Well, here I'll bring the proof. If I don't bring the proof, then you shouldn't be listening to me. Yeah, personally, and if I bring the proof and I'm telling you this is what we have, and I'm going to conjecture and I'm going to theorize where it's going to go, I'll tell you, I'm theorizing. So, but yeah, I am also as Joe's from New Jersey. New Jersey and New Yorkers are a lot alike. We tend not to back down. Okay, we tend to stick our feet in. So when people and some of them maybe with good intentions tell me I should just back down and let it go, you've made it personal. When you're not doxing me, whatever, that's part of being an investigator. You dox my family, my mother, my wife, my in-laws. Nah, you've made it personal. So I'm going to keep on documenting. That's what it comes down to. So, Mike, thank you, Mike, for bringing this up. I wouldn't have, but you're right. It has been a recent topic on social media and even on some of these YouTube videos. So, folks, there's your reason as to why. Okay? If you don't shine light, it's the best disinfectant, right? If you don't shine the light, they will get away, and they is just a general term right now. They will get away with taking advantage of members of the community. I don't stand by for that. So well, that's a high note to wrap this up on.
Yeah, really. Well, I haven't even
always leave him. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's let Joe get the last word.
I got one thing. Well, I got a couple things. Matt asked me to plug my something I do on my channel. Every Sunday afternoon, I post an adventure hook, which is one of those YouTube shorts. So it's like it's a 60-second adventure hook set in the world of Greyhawk.
Oh, nice.
And so far I've done about 40 of them, and they're just really quick, boom, boom, boom. I try to tie them into the setting as much as I can. But I wanted to read one of the spells from the Swords of Cthulhu book. It's called Agony of the Black Goat. The spell, it's a 6th-level spell. It causes one creature in range to immediately have a great growth within its abdomen or corresponding location. The growth will, in the space of a single round, swell to the size of a melon, causing crippling pain in the process. If the target is wearing non-metal armor, you'll take 2d6 damage before the armor is rent asunder. So you've got this thing growing in your abdomen. And if you're wearing metal armor, you take double that because the armor can't break.
Ooh.
And if the pain prevents spell casting or movement is limited, you can remove it by surgery or magic. Surgery by an unskilled hand will cause an additional 2d4 because you're taking a dagger and you're just kind of trying to get this swelling growth out of the person's body. And then it gives some things about what will heal it and stuff like that. But so I wanted to. There is a little bit of the body horror in the book too, which nice. We never talked about the movies, the Lovecraft movies.
Oh, we'll have to bring it back.
Yes.
Yeah, we are. Okay. Well, there you go. We have to bring him back now.
Yeah. Or we'd probably have to bring Glennon. Then
we better bring Glennon.
Yeah, I would have to relegate myself to just monitoring the chat I get to review Tolkien movies. I would be so totally effing lost. But
okay, we can talk for just a couple minutes because my favorite Lovecraft movie of all time is the one that came out about 20 years ago on HBO. It was based on the case of Charles Dexter Ward. Do you know what I'm talking about, Joe? I cannot remember the name of this. And it was a
is that the one with Dean Stockwell?
Yes. And it was real. I mean, it just kind of appeared. One day I watched it going, this is a case of Charles Dexter Ward.
Yeah.
And I love it because it was very low budget. It came out, I want to say it came out in about the early 90s, late 80s. And it was just, I thought they did a really good job with it. I didn't think it was over the top because I think the problem is a lot of Lovecraft movies are over the top. And it's like these people have never read Lovecraft and don't understand that he was not about lots of gore and this and that. Most of the awful things in his books are just suggested. They don't really even happen on camera, so to speak.
I really liked The Color Out of Space, the newest one that was a year.
I have not seen that one yet.
They went full body horror at the very end. Spoilers, but the whole thing just builds up this tension and you don't know what's going on, and they did a really good job. But as far as if you're looking for good Lovecraft movies, the HP Lovecraft Film Society.
Yes, I've seen those. Are great. Those are both excellent,
wonderful stuff. They did,
yes,
and they have
excellent
DVD collections of their stuff. They did a silent version of The Call of Cthulhu. It was like if it had been made while Lovecraft was alive, and it's a silent film. It's amazing.
So the movie I'm talking about was called The Resurrected. It's 1991. It stars Chris Sarandon, Jane Sibbett, John Terry, Robert Romanus. Robert Romanus, for those who don't remember, he was in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. He was the Hispanic guy. But yes, if you get a chance, check it out. It was released direct to video in 1992. I remember seeing it on HBO. It's called The Resurrected. I think it's one of the better Lovecraft adaptations to the screen.
The one I'm thinking of was from the 70s.
Right, I know which one you're thinking of. Yeah, I know which one. It was called. I don't think it was called The Case of Charles Dexter Ward, but it had the same plot line.
It was some generic, the horror of something or other. It was a generic title.
But it was called The Resurrected, and I've seen it in the last probably 5 or 6 years. I thought it held up okay. I didn't think it was that bad. Obviously, the special effects are 30-something years old and everything, but they did a good job because it's almost a straight remake, really. Now it is set in modern times. It's not set in the 20s, but it's set in modern times. But that's probably one of my favorite remakes. But yes, the Lovecraft Society movies, I have both of them on DVD. They're excellent.
There's actually a bunch of DVDs. They've got a ton of stuff out there.
Oh, really? So I've only seen. So I saw the silent one, which is called Cthulhu, and I also saw Whisper in Darkness.
They had a bunch of collections of shorter films. One of them was Cool Air, which is one of my favorite stories, and it was a terrific adaptation.
Well, I've got to find those, and I got to look those up. I have not seen those yet.
Back when Netflix used to still send you DVDs,
oh god,
we rented them all and we saw them all there.
Oh wow, okay,
that's back in the day.
Back in the
day, apparently
when I was a young fella.
Apparently, they still do that for some people. If people still are doing a DVD service or Blu-ray service, I guess now. With them.
Well, when you have Glenn on one Friday night, get Joe on and I'll pop on too, and we will do an extensive take on all the Lovecraftian movies out there, and then we'll talk about maybe why they're so terrible. Usually, which I've seen some really bad ones.
Well, let's see. This Friday is the random generated party, so it's all my fellow gamers on Monday, who I named earlier in the show, and then I figure I think that the last Friday of the month is the 5th Friday, so there's no live stream that last night or that last Friday of the month. So I get a day off on a Friday, but this Friday is the random generated party at 8 p.m. Rich and I for Gamers Health at 8 p.m. 3 live streams a week for the total price of $0.
And tomorrow is my weekly video on my channel. Check it out. Greyhawk goodness.
Greyhawk goodness.
Lots of Greyhawk goodness on Greyhawk Grognard.
There you go. Folks, www.swordsofcthulhu.com. Don't be like myself. Don't be like Joe. Don't misspell it initially. I misspelled it like 3 times. And then Joe sent me the proper spelling, and he misspelled it once and then caught it right away.
Son of a bitch.
So it's not an easy thing to spell, and your spell check might not correct it. But swordsofcthulhu.com will take you to the Kickstarter. Listen, Joe is one of those Kickstarter creators that writes the stuff before he kicks it. He is always spot on. Your money helps this to become a reality, but Joe's put in the yeoman's work ahead of time. So it's always, you're not paying for a hope and a dream. Okay.
No, you're gonna get it. It's gonna be in your hands.
I'm literally looking at it right now. It's done.
Mm-hmm.
The art, the money pays for art and editing.
Well, and that's really what more do you want? But the writing is done. Okay, and when we're talking about writing, we're not talking about new TSR writing. We're talking somebody who has a good grasp of the English language and grammar, and is not going to rely upon Grammarly to do the editing. So, God bless, folks. Again, huge thanks to Greyhawk Grognard, Joe Bloch. Joe, are you going to be at North Texas this year?
I will not be in North Texas. I will be at Historicon. I will be at Mepicon next fall. I hope to be at
ShireCon?
What's that?
ShireCon?
So I'll definitely be at ShireCon. I hope to be at TotalCon.
Okay. All right.
We got to get you out of North Texas one of these days, Joe. You would really enjoy it.
I really want to go.
Con.
I also,
yeah.
I'm trying to get into what's the other one in Wisconsin? The big one.
GaryCon?
Gamehole.
Gary? Yeah,
Gamehole. I'm trying to get in there this fall.
Gamehole was run by a very organized ethnic German. So if the trains ran on time, this con runs like clockwork. It is amazing. So. All right, folks. On that note, again, swordsofcthulhu.com. Go support the Kickstarter. It's inexpensive. It's Joe Bloch. It is the Dark Ones. It is Cthulhu. As always, we're still kind of sort of in the midst of the pandemic, so use your common sense. All right? I'm not your mother. I'm not your father. Okay? Theoretically, you're an adult. Use your common sense. Other than that, be safe, be well, God bless, roll those dice, roll them well. And we'll have a video up again tomorrow. About what? God only fucking knows. All right, folks. Later.